This is amazing. I've been here speaking in and out over the about a year, and I came here, signed a contract in November as your minister of record. And we started out building energy, and look at the wonderful gathering we're having today. Look at the incredible music we are having today. Feel the energy. Come on. Feel the energy. Feeling the energy that we are producing. It doesn't happen without you. It doesn't happen without you. I'm not very good by myself. I'm adequate. Let's just put it that way. And so as we gather together and we build energy, we started calling and sharing the word amazing. And we had that song, I think, in the fall. And here we are again, celebrating that we as a spiritual community are amazing. Woo! All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We are going forward with our last Sunday of the Soul of Money. 5 Sundays. I hope you have taken some of these ideas to heart and have begun to think of yourself as prosperous. I am prosperous beyond my wildest dreams. Now, that was one of my first prosperity affirmations I learned when I was about 21. I am prosperous beyond my wildest dreams. Let's say it together. I am prosperous beyond my wildest dreams. Now, everybody's dreams are different. So that may include many, many things, or it may be a short list. Today, we're talking about turning the tide. How do I move from here to here? How do I turn the tide? Now, I'm just going to review a little bit. We started out with 3 toxic myths. The myths, that's not easy to say. The myths of insufficiency. The myths of insufficiency. And the first one is, there's not enough. There's just not enough. Never has been. More is better. The more I have, the better I am. And the third one was, that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. There's not enough. More is better. That's just the way it is. We then moved on to the law of sufficiency. And the law of sufficiency says, there is enough. There is enough. It's just a challenge of distribution. There's more food, there's more oil, there's more clothing, there's more of everything in warehouses. And that's all over the planet. Millions and millions and millions of things, stuff that could be being used in warehouses. There is enough. So how do we personally shift from the belief that there is not enough, that there is enough in my life? We ask the question, enough of what? Enough love, enough friends, enough financial abundance, enough whatever it is you would be, enough health, enough wealth. What is it that I believe in some construct in this mind that I'm lacking? I won't ask for a raise of hands. However, has anyone in this room ever felt that you were lacking something? Okay. Oh, we got 2 hands right in front. So we were lacking love. We were lacking encouragement. We were lacking financial abundance. We were lacking strength. We were lacking. And so we looked through this filter of lack, and that is called fear. That is called fear. There is not enough. So we're shifting, remember, we're turning the tide from fear to faith. I'm turning the tide from fear to faith. So what we're talking about is not just change here, not just shift. This is a word I talk about all the time. Spiritual transformation. So how do we not just change? How do we not just shift mentally? How do I spiritually transform? How do I embrace my faith? And I believe everyone in this room would answer this differently. Some of us would do it through meditation. Some of us would do it through processing in journaling. We come to it from many different paths. The question is, am I willing? Now, I've been asking that question for 40 years in ministries all over the country. Are you willing? Am I willing to have spiritual transformation? Do I think I'm capable even? Am I willing to transform my core beliefs? I don't know about you, the way you were raised. Were you raised to save string? Were you raised to be cautious? Were you raised? Nothing's wrong with any of this. This isn't about shame or blame. It's just, how do I move from where I was to where I am today? How do I do that? Lynn Twist, in her book, had a very interesting concept. She talked about hospicing. Make sure you hear me right. Hospicing our old beliefs. In other words, treating our old beliefs with gentle energy. Treating our old beliefs that we are ready to let die with tenderness and compassion. Instead of going, with tenderness and compassion. Shifting my view of that fear with compassion. Of course you were afraid. Of course that was the way you saw it. The world says so-and-so to us. I can hospice. Isn't that interesting? I can hospice my old ways of thinking and beliefs. So how do I then take action? Last week I talked about leaning into greatness. We could talk about leaning a little. She used greatness. Leaning into greatness. In other words, your intuition. Your intuition is your greatness. Just think about that a minute. Your intuition is your greatness. Are you following your intuition, or are you following what someone else says? My intuition led me here. How could I have ever ended up here? I have no idea. And here I am. And here you are, and here we are. Leaning into greatness is leaning into my intuitive energy field. How often do we stop that? I am the only one in this room. This is so interesting. So that sense of leaning into greatness, or another way of saying it is leaning into guidance. I'm leaning into my guidance. And how do I then take action? Then we went on to talk about our legacy. If I lean into my intuition, if I lean into my greatness, I'm leaning into my legacy. In other words, what do I have to give? What ideas do I have to share? What love and compassion is mine to give? How do I do that? How do I find the freedom to do that without living in a box? So it's the courage to step out of the box that we have created, actually. I created my box, so now I can take down the walls. I can take down the walls of my old beliefs, step out, step forth, and look forward. I can appreciate the energy that is guiding me. What you appreciate appreciates. It grows. When you are fearful, you close down. Is that true? When we appreciate, follow our guidance, we are enhanced. I wanted to share a story from the book. It's one of my favorites, of Lynn Twist, who, as I've shared many weeks, took on as her life mission the Hunger Project. Now that's a life mission. Feeding people all over the world. Millions, millions, billions of people. Now she had a background in fundraising, but she realized it really wasn't feeding her soul. And what she had to go through some introspective times, and she realized what would feed her soul was feeding people. And so she began working with all kinds of nonprofits, being called all over the world. And one of my favorite stories is when she was called to a village in Africa. Now, this village had had droughts for over 6 years. Babies were dying. Elderly were dying. And there was not enough water. There were 17 villages that surrounded the village she went to, and they all were without almost any water. So she had to drive across, you couldn't even land in an airplane where she was going. She flew in a commercial flight, then a small plane, then a bus, and then a truck. And she said, as she's arriving, the children are running and singing, so excited she's here. She's coming. The American woman is coming. And she drives in, and there's all these people, and they're singing, and they're jumping up and down. And they're so excited she's there. And then they separate, and the men go over here. This is a Muslim village. And the women go over here. Now, the mullahs are the head of the village, and they call her over to a meeting. And they explain about the drought, and they want her help. And all these women are sitting behind her. They're sitting in a big circle on the ground under one tree, the only tree that's alive in this desert. The women are sitting behind her. She scooches over, and one of the women, who's not allowed, comes and sits with her. Now, the mullahs didn't say anything. The mullahs keep talking about this problem. She scooches one more. Another woman comes into the circle. The mullahs don't say anything. Finally, that meeting is over, and the women whisper to her, "Can we have a meeting with you?" So she gathers all the women together, and the women share that they have visions and dreams that there is a lake underneath them. And the men won't listen. They said, "We've tried and tried and tried, and they won't listen. All we want to do is dig a well and see if there's water. But they won't let us. They're convinced that there is no water under there." So she goes over to the mullahs and says, "The women believe there's water here. They want to dig a well." No women can do work. They cannot dig wells. That's men's work. So Lynn Twist sends shovels, ropes, picks to the women, and gets the men to agree that just once, they could dig. It took them about 3 months. They took turns. Of course, they had their children. They had a lot of work to do. 24 hours a day, they're digging. Guess what? There was an aquifer of water right under them. They were able to access that water. 17 villages of 75,000 people now have water. There was enough. There is enough. Now that was guidance. It wasn't in a book. It was guidance. So how do we take our guidance and create the next level of our transformation? What is the universe calling you, we, and the global consciousness to do and be? Yes, there are challenges in this world. Yes, there are struggles in this world. Yes, and there's also water under the ground when we listen. There's also water. So transformation is about accountability. Ooh, that's a big word. Accountability. Am I willing to be accountable to my spiritual self? I don't know. Really? Do I have to? Couldn't I just pretend? No, it doesn't work that way. I have to be accountable to my spiritual self, not to anyone else on the planet. I'm accountable to myself. And where do I begin? I love this story. This is a Gandhi story. Some of you know Paul and I traveled with Arun Gandhi to India, had an amazing experience. And in that time period, we had small workshops. There were about 20 of us. And he would share stories from his grandfather, all kinds of principles. And this was one of my favorite stories. And this was a teaching story that Mahatma Gandhi would use with people. It was a teaching story of a young man who worked at a large company, and he met a young woman who worked in the same company. They would go for walks at breaks sometimes. They started talking. They started meeting on Saturdays and going for walks in different gardens. And one day, she brought him a rose. Well, he didn't know how to handle that. He was kind of embarrassed. So she gave him the rose. He said thank you. And in his mind, he wanted to invite her to dinner. And they were getting closer and closer. So he goes home, and he realizes his apartment is a mess. So he goes to Gandhi, and he says, what do I do? What do I do? I don't know how to handle this. Gandhi says, start with your sink. Start with your sink. Oh, the man goes home. His sink is filled with dirty dishes. Now, this man hasn't washed a dish, however, he even bought new dishes so he didn't have to wash dishes. I'm just saying. So he washed a dish, and then he washed two, he washed three. He washed everything in the sink, and guess what? There was a glass he could put the rose in. But then he looked on the counters. Now, the counters were stacked with stuff. He cleaned the counters. Turns around, there's a table full of more dishes. Cleans off the table. Well, then he bumps into all the trash that he's never taken out. So then when you take the trash out, the floor's dirty. So then what does he have to do? He has to clean the floor. So then he goes, oh my. So then he walks into the living room. That's a mess. Where does he start? In the corner on the sofa. At the end, he cleans his whole apartment. And he realizes he lives in a really nice place. Who knew? Who knew? He invited this young woman to dinner, and we all know the end of that story. So where do we start? We start at the sink. We start at the most fundamental place within ourselves. We start simply, and we start. We don't just think about it. We just don't talk about it. We do something. And the question comes again, am I willing? Am I willing? So I have a challenge I'd like to read to you at the end of Lynn Twist's book. I challenge you to use your money, every dollar, every penny, every purchase, every stock, and every bond to voice this transformation. I challenge you to use the money that flows through your life, and it does flow through all our lives, to express the truth and context of sufficiency. I challenge you to move the resources that flow through your life towards your highest commitments and ideals, those things you stand for. I challenge you to hold money as a common trust that we're all responsible for using in ways that nurture and empower us, and all life, our planet, and future generations. I challenge you to imbue your money with soul, your soul, and let it stand for who you are, your love, your heart, your world, your word, and humanity. So I'm challenging you today, as a personally and as a spiritual community. Are we living in fear? Are we living in lack? Are we living in faith? Are we spiritually transforming? Or are we hiding out? Have we forgotten about the sink? Are we taking action? And what action would that be? She ends the book with the butterfly effect. Now, we talk a lot about butterflies here. The butterfly effect, this is the snapshot, not the big picture. The butterfly effect is the caterpillar who overconsumes. At the last stages of the caterpillar's life, it eats, he becomes a glutton. Or she, they become gluttonous. They eat and eat and eat, and they get so big, they're they could barely move. And at a certain moment, the imaginal cells take over. Because the caterpillar is like this. The imaginal cells start creating and start moving in that caterpillar. Eventually, it begins to go through metamorphosis, and it changes, and something comes through that body that has wings on it. And it has to hang upside down to dry those wings before it can fly. Now, we have a lot of butterflies in this room. Some are paper, and some are all of us. We are butterflies. We are change makers. We are amazing. That doesn't discount anyone else. It includes us. We are only left behind if we believe it. We only don't have enough if we believe it. This is our opportunity to spiritually transform, to take action on our guidance, on our wisdom, on our truth. Now, I know I'm talking to the choir, and many, many of you have done this. I'm not saying that this isn't our truth. It's just staying with it, going the next mile, and the next mile, and the next mile. Are we willing? Yes. 3, 4, 5, 6, 28, 38. Okay. So now we're going to go into our time of meditation. Thank you for being willing. Deep breath. Deep breath. Deep breath. I'd like to invite you to wiggle around in your chair, shake your hands out a little bit. Ooh. Shrug your shoulders. Open your hands as a sign to the universe. Open your palms as a sign to the universe. I'm open and receptive to this new good. Or place your hands on your heart. That feels comfortable. Some of us are visual people, and so I invite you to visualize the energy flowing through you. Some of us are tactile, and we feel it. Get chills or little feeling down the spine. We all experience the universal presence in different ways. A softness of the heart. And so as we quiet the mind and we listen, we open ourselves to guidance and wisdom that may seem almost unimaginable. As our song so beautifully said, one voice. One voice, two voices, three voices, all of our voices together. All of our voices together is one voice. All of our heartbeats is one heartbeat. So each in our own way, dropping into that place, that holy sacred place where no one else goes, your sacred space. And as we enter into the silence now, going even deeper. I am, we are, being directed and led by a universal presence of love and light and wisdom. We accept the challenge of using our financial abundance as a flow of possibilities, as a flow of grace and purpose. A higher purpose than we may have ever known was possible. When you are ready, and not a minute before, little peeks out of those eyes. opening those eyes. Yes, 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 yes. And so it is, in the name and through the power of all great spiritual teachers. We say, amen, amen, and so it is.